And anything you can do to come to terms with, especially the parts that we looked at, I think is really worthwhile doing. In the future, if you get to see a live Mozart opera, you'll feel like you're clued in. You'll feel like you're a part of it in a way that is really quite unique and quite powerful. But I think what Maynard Solomon is saying, that there is no standard set of characters for the late Mozart operas, and I think that's a powerful statement. He's saying that in the early operas that we studied by Mozart, when you meet a stock character, even though the music is gorgeous and the ideas are lovely, there's really none of the kind of complexity that you get in the later operas, where you get characters that are sort of good but sort of bad, and occasionally good and then later bad, like you get in the Magic Flute, or a character as complicated as Don Giovanni, who's funny all the time and really charming at times, and then extremely diabolical. You don't have that in the early operas. And what Maynard Solomon is ultimately saying is that you can't spend yourself on these operas and get to the point where you've heard them too much and you've processed every angle on them. He hasn't. I haven't. I don't think anybody has. Even singers who sing these operas over and over and over again find real richness in these characters, in these personifications. So that if you sing Donna Anna over the course of a career, every production you'll learn something new, some new angle on her personality and the way that she interacts with Don Giovanni or Leporello or other characters that are floating around. And this kind of intense complexity is something that is essential to the Mozart style, essential to the Mozart personality. And once you get that in the operas, then it becomes just so easy to hear it in the Requiem. That, I think, is the key. If you come to it from the last symphonies and then try to get the Requiem, you never quite get where he's going. And all of these different things that come together. We had the great fortune, really, to study Mozart's, one of his first minuets, K5, F major, and we saw how perilous this thing was when he's just a freaking kid, just a little kid, you know, and he's already pushing right at the edge of trying to put threes and fours together and trying to get things to go that you just want to tell him, hey, make that two pieces. And let's be a little sensible about this, and let's not be so dangerous all the time. This is a little minuet. Let's be dainty about it. But he won't. He can't. He's just unable to do it that way. He has to get the spoon to balance perfectly. If you get a spoon just right, you can set it right up on its edge and it'll stay there. But boy, do you have to have it perfect, and you probably can't do it. But Mozart seemed to be able to do that every day. He was just like, boom, there it is. There's that piece. Oop, there's the next one. And it just sits there, perfectly balanced all the time, and yet not balancing on much. And I'm going to argue in that opening movement of the Requiem, not balanced at all, and intentionally so. What does it mean when it's not balanced? This is the way that one can get ready. So here's the story. What I'm asking you to do is to get ready for the final exam next week and do well on that. And you did well on the midterm. What I learned on the midterm was that you really absorbed a lot of the material and the vocabulary that we tried to lay out in the first part of the semester. And I want you to double that for the final. Why? Because it's Mozart. That's why. And because you could spend the rest of your life just listening to this music, just studying this music, and find it an infinity in itself. And it's the most profound thing. Make sure you, when you're studying this and you're trying to get the terminology and you're trying to remember where the characters are in each opera and all that, and you're kind of frustrated, listen to the stuff. Just listen to it. It'll pull you back like you can't believe, because there's nothing I've said this semester that means anything more than the music means. The music means everything. If you could just listen to that and get what you needed, I would never, ever teach this class, because there's no point. But, you know, what you try to do when you're teaching Mozart is to just try to get you to a place where you can hear what's happening there. and focus in on how magical and how unique and how absolutely fundamental that it is. And once you're at that place, you really will listen to it forever without ever tiring of it, without ever exhausting it. It's so different from every other music in that sense, right? The complexity of it is something you can live in. It's something that if you eat it, it will be nutritious for you, right? It'll nourish you. You'll feel yourself being fed by listening to this music, by absorbing what's possible in understanding people that you know and care about and love, by listening to how Mozart moves characters through an opera. And suddenly you see your best friend in this, and you hear your best friend in the music, and you learn something from that, and you treat people maybe a little bit differently than you would have otherwise, with a different kind of understanding, because Mozart is trying to tell you that being alive is not simple, and it's not straightforward, and it's never ordinary. Because Mozart was incapable of doing music that was ordinary ever. He never wrote ordinary music. And he's telling you that as an individual, there's nothing ordinary about your life either. Even if you think it's an ordinary life, and even if you try to make it as ordinary as you can, there's nothing ordinary about it. And the range of expression, the range of emotions that we come across is not ordinary. So that's what I want you to work on, and I want you to develop it into something that means something to you. The right answer on the test isn't what we're trying to get at in this course. It'd be nice if you're close, right? But ultimately what I'm looking for you to show me is that the music means something to you, that the ideas mean something to you. There's a story that I told on the website here about an experience I had at Eastman School, where a very good friend of mine who's a cellist was sitting next to me one day in this very strange room 120 in the Eastman School, the old school, where it was a recording studio, so they made it perfectly dry. There was no life in that room. There was no resonance. When you played an instrument, when you conducted an orchestra, it sounded like it was just in space or something. And then they would add reverb, which is what they did in the 80s. They thought they could do that and simulate any kind of reverb, so you could simulate natural acoustics. It'd be better than natural acoustics. Well, it never is, because natural acoustics is mysterious. There's bounces, there's vibrations, there's resonances. But anyway, the point being, it was dark and the sound just empty. And there were some Tibetan monks that came, and they had the big horns, throwing rice around the Eastman School, wearing these big red costumes with the plumes on the top and these gold robes, ceremonial robes. And they came in, and we were all just sitting there on a regular day, at Eastman School of Music, getting beaten up and doing the things that we routinely did there. And what they were singing was this magical stuff. In Tibetan singing, I don't know if you've ever heard it, but Tibetan singing, they sing chords. They get their sinuses in their heads to vibrate sympathetically with the tones that they're singing. You have to hear it really sometime. And it doesn't come across in recordings very well. So they'll start off and they sing really low. And the whole group's and then suddenly, you hear these tones that just float out of nowhere. And they can change them together. And so you hear something that's like this swooping, swirling, whistling kind of sound while they're singing. Overtone singing is what it's called. And we're all just like, this is like the coolest thing I've ever heard. We're all just sitting there completely blown away, right? Even though there's no acoustic, whatever. They finished, just politely clapping, really awkward. And my friend, the cellist, because it's Eastman School and we did this kind of thing, comes up to the monks. We came up and talked with them. And my friend says, I've taught myself to sing in the style that you just sang in. And the monk said, really? He says, yeah, let me show you. So this kid, right? Yeah, boom, there it goes. He's got him. He actually could do it. They're like, what the hell? Where did you learn to do that? He says, yeah. I learned to do it in the shower, and finally I figured out how to do it, right? And the monk looks at him and he says, it's very good. He says, tell me, what does it mean to you? And he's like, what didn't mean anything to him? So why would you do it if it doesn't mean anything to you, right? Why would you learn to chant like a religious chant if it has no meaning to you at all? Because that's the way that we get detached from what we really do. We do the things that we think we ought to do, or we imitate the things we think we ought to imitate, but it doesn't mean anything to you, see? And what I'm talking about is what music means to you. And what I want to see on the final exam is what Mozart means to you, not what the right answers are. Show me that you've engaged in this in some way. Show me that you've learned something specific about it and that you've started to process it in some way that's really extraordinary. That's what's important. You know, the details of what we're talking about ultimately fade, right? You forget about those in a course. But what Mozart's music means to you will never, ever, ever fade. And I tell you, I remember every single piece of Mozart that I learned as an undergraduate. And every time I hear those pieces, it brings me back to the exact time and place that I learned them 30 years ago. It really brings it right back with such precision. And even though I've heard those pieces at many times during my life, it means something to you when you hear it the first time and learn it, and you're learning it with your friends, and you're learning it, and you're just like, really, that's what that symphony's about, you know? And you just tuck it away, and you're like, thanks, I'm going to hold on to that. That's what I want to do with that, because that means something to me. And what it means is also something in your own life at a particular time. And you carry that with you too. That's circumstantial listening we learned in Music 122. That's the beautiful imprint that you have on the music that you learn at a particular time in a particular place in your life when it becomes something that means something to you. So it's not just that I want you to imitate Tibetan chant. I don't want you to imitate the answers on this exam. I want you to assimilate it and really write something that shows that you have contacted this music in some way. That's what I want you to do, right? Is that fair enough? Because it's Mozart, right? All right, I have recorded this, so if you only caught part of it, what I'm planning to do is to make it available in some format. Vincent has already said that he will perhaps post it on Facebook, which is all right with me. I am going to try to put it on perhaps an audio CD or something. I'm not sure how I'm going to get it from here onto something that you can transport, but we'll work that out tomorrow so that you can listen to the whole thing from beginning to end if you so desire. All right, until then.